As people, we all face times that we're overwhelmed by the challenges, the responsibilities, and the expectations that are before us. Even as Christians, we face those times. We face the expectations of Jesus, the responsibilities that Jesus gives us, the convictions that he calls us to have, and the visions that he asks us to fulfill. And we can feel overwhelmed by those things and just feel like, I can't do it. I can't live up to that. I can't make it anymore. And at that time, we either compromise those expectations, or we quit and run away from those standards and expectations, or we do something that the disciples did 2,000 years ago. They faced the expectations and the visions of Jesus. They knew they couldn't compromise. They knew they couldn't quit. And so they looked Jesus in the eye and pleaded to him, Lord, increase our faith. That's what this series is about, how we can dig down deep and increase our faith to be able to more readily live up to the visions and expectations that Jesus has for each of us and that life just throws our way. There was a time many years ago that I went through a super challenging, difficult, kind of gut-wrenching, soul-searching time in my own life, and I did this thorough Bible study of all the different ways the Bible commanded or taught or exemplified how people increase their faith. And I was able to narrow it down to 7 biblical ways, 7 Holy Spirit inspired ways, 7 tested and true ways that we can increase our faith. And that's what I'm sharing in this series with all of you. So we're ready to dive into step number 1, okay? Way number 1. If we're climbing the ladder towards the pinnacle of faith, this is rung number 1 to be able to increase our faith. And that is to remember past blessings. Remember past blessings. Here in 1 Samuel chapter 17, Saul replied to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. What an inspiring passage this is. We've all heard from our days of youth, maybe in those pictorial Bibles that you had, the story of David going up against this Philistine warrior Goliath. But here we see a really cool little revealed secret of how someone increased their faith. As David faced the greatest challenge of his life, the greatest challenge of his faith, to go against this giant that Saul, who was this incredible king and fighting man, he would come out every day dressed and ready for battle with his entire phalanx of soldiers, and they'd line up thinking, this is going to be the day. And then Goliath would come out and scream at him, and then all the Israelites and Saul would just run away, back like, run away. We can't do it. We can't defeat him. And then David just comes to the front line, and David literally, I don't know if you remember why he came there. He came delivering bread and cheese. This was like the first Domino's delivery boy. Okay, he's just like the cheese boy. He comes to the front lines and he's like, hey, who is this? Who is this guy that dare defy the armies of the living God? Let me go out there and fight him. And they're like, man, you're only a boy. You can't do it. And he goes, come on, I know I can. And what gave him the confidence that he could step out and overcome this greatest challenge to his faith ever? Well, he remembered the victories and rewards of his faith in the past. And that gave him the faith boost that he needed to claim even greater victory in the present. Victories of the past are stepping stones towards greater victories in the future. Victories in the past are stepping stones towards greater victories in the future. This is a huge biblical theme. If you've ever read through the book of Deuteronomy, the entire book of Deuteronomy has one key word that's repeated over and over and over. It's the whole theme of the book of Deuteronomy. And that word is, anybody know? Remember. Remember how the Lord your God led you all these years. Remember what he said to you. Remember what your eyes saw. Remember what your ears heard. Over and over, he just says, remember, remember, remember. As they're getting ready to go in and claim the promised land, God knew they'd never have the faith to conquer the promised land and all the challenges that were to come if they didn't remember the rewards and blessings of their faith in the past. So he calls them to remember. The whole book of Psalms just recounts all the blessings of God's people up until that day. Over and over in Psalms, you hear like the crossing of the Red Sea repeated over and over. Man, the Egyptians were coming in here, and then like the wind was blowing here, and then God did this over and over. You're like, yeah, we saw the movie, okay, we know the story. But they just keep recounting it over and over because they knew that the memories of victories in the past were the stepping stones towards greater victories in the future. Even Jesus, you see him discipling his people as he's always trying to call their faith higher. You remember like when he fed the people, the 4,000, the 5,000, the 5,000, the 4,000 with the bread and the fish. The second time they face that challenge, they're like, oh, we don't have anything to eat. He's like, don't you remember? Last time you were hungry, how many fish were there? And how many breads were there? Piece of bread were there? And then afterwards, how many? Don't you remember? He's telling them, remember what I've done. Remember the rewards of your faith in the past, and you'll have greater faith for the challenges of the future. It's so easy for us as people to remember past defeats, past failures, past flops. Man, we remember it, we feel it like it was yesterday. I mean, I can just like literally just picture and remember as though I'm right there. So many incredible failures. But it's so difficult to remember past blessings. I find myself kind of explaining them away or just kind of being so overwhelmed in the moment now that I go, yeah, but that was back then. Yeah, but I was younger then. Yeah, but God was working in different ways then. And I water down the victories of the past. It's so easy to remember the defeats, so difficult to remember the blessings. And in so doing, I rob myself of the opportunity to increase my faith. When I studied this in Bangkok and studied this specific passage, I remember sitting down and going, okay, what have been some of the greatest victories that have come about by God working in my life? Some of the most incredible miracles to this point. And I thought, let me just identify several of them. And those, I call them my smooth stones. Remember how David went down, he picked up 5 smooth stones. He only needed one, but he picked up 5 just in case, And so I thought, I want my smooth stones of remembrance, my stones of victory with which I can slay the Goliath challenges in the future. And so I sat down and I thought about my whole Christian life up to that point, and I came up with 5. Then since that time, that was like 94, I guess it was, 1994. And since that time, I've if I had to come up with 5 or 6, I've replaced some of those stones with like better stones. Like, ooh, this one's bigger. Ooh, this one's more round. Ooh, this one's got a point right in the front to like really drop Goliath. I found some better stones, and I keep adding to my little arsenal here, my smooth stones of miracles to give me greater confidence in the future. Always at the top of my list is my conversion. Because I just go, man, I was an atheist. I used to publicly debate against the authenticity of the Bible and the existence of God at LSU. I would stand up at this place called Free Speech Alley every Thursday. They have like 2 hours, and you could stand up, and there was hundreds of people around, and anybody could say whatever they want, and I'd get up there and publicly debate against Christianity, and there is no God, and the Bible's a storybook, and those kind of things. And I look at like from then to now, I'm doing the exact opposite. And I remember that conversion point in September 1983 that I became a Christian, that I got faith, and my friends were like, what? You did what? Like they couldn't believe I became a Christian, then couldn't believe I went into the ministry. And I just remember my conversion. I go, man, if God can do that in my life, he can do that in anybody's life. Nothing can hinder him. That's my favorite stone. But then I have another one that I was on Air Force ROTC scholarship. And actually, I had a full ride scholarship, and I was selected to be the Corps commander who is over all the Air Force and all the Army as well at LSU. And it rotates between Army and Air Force every other year. And this one year it fell on the Air Force, and they selected me to be the head guy over all this, and the Corps commander. And then they also selected me to go to Washington, D.C., one person from each state, to go to Washington, D.C., meet with the senators and meet with the president on behalf of, these Air Force cadets and these Corps commanders. And they told me all this right at this time that I was like contemplating as a new Christian, yeah, but I want to get out of the Air Force and go into the full-time ministry. And so when I went to tell my captain, hey, I want to get out, that's when she told me, we've selected you to be Corps commander. We selected you to go to Washington, D.C. And I'm like, well, let me tell you what's on my heart first. I'm like, I want to get out. She's like, you want to do what? And so then we looked at the regulations about how to get out. And the regulations said that if they even anticipate that I'm trying to breach my contract, I could be sent active duty enlisted immediately. And I was like, I don't want to go peel potatoes, nothing against enlisted people, but I'm like, I don't want to go do that. I want to finish my engineering degree. I just don't want to be in the Air Force afterwards. And so anyway, it came down to where like, can I get out? Can I not get out? Will I lose my education? Will I be sent active duty enlisted? The stakes were so high. And I remember praying and fasting. The whole campus ministry was praying and fasting for a miracle. And it all came down to this one trial, one military trial that they set up, that if I have justifiable causes deemed by a proper military investigation, then I can be released from my contract. And I had my ministers coming over from the church to testify on my behalf, and they said I could bring any uniformed military officer as my personal counsel, my lawyer, if you will, and I waived that right because they're all against me. I'm like, I don't want an Air Force person testifying for me because they don't want me to get out. But that morning, the morning of this trial, I remember getting up really early and going for a walk and praying and saying, God, my back is to the Red Sea. If you get me out of this, I said it, I'll never doubt you again. I go, it would be like levitating the table. That's literally what I just said. It would be like an undeniable miracle. I went into my class. I had a class 7:30 to 9. After my class, my captain came up to me. She goes, John, do you know who's in the building today? My hearing was set up at 2 o'clock that afternoon. She goes, do you know who's in the building today? I said, no. And she said, Captain Ogg. I go, well, who's Captain Ogg? She said, he's a reserve officer and is the head attorney for Jimmy Swaggart. No offense to Jimmy Swaggart, but I think he needed a good attorney at the time. Okay, he's based there in Baton Rouge. And so he's the head attorney for Jimmy Swaggart and a reserve officer. And she goes, he's a guest speaker in the building talking about the chaplaincy. He just spoke, and maybe if you catch him, you could get some input about your trial. I go running outside, and I see this guy leaving. I go, Captain Ogg. And he turns around, and I ran up to him, and I go, hey, my name's John Lusk. And I introduced myself. I told him what's going on. He goes, John, he goes, I'm shivering, and I am now, even as I remember it. He goes, I just did this lesson on the chaplaincy. I have all day free, but I've been out of town for the last few days. I'm going out of town tomorrow. I have all day free. I was just thinking, what am I going to do with my day? He said, I'd love to represent you free of charge. So he goes back in. This was pre-internet. He gets all the regulations. It's like 80 pounds of books. And he comes, takes 2 trips, fills up the back seat of his car with these regulations. He goes, I'll see you at 2 o'clock. I'm like, yes, score. And he comes back at 2 o'clock. We have this like serious, kind of like a Few Good Men, okay, military, trial and stuff like that. And Captain Ogg is quiet the whole time. And I'm like, wow, fine answer to prayer you turned out to be. He's like not saying a thing. And then at the end, the colonel who was presiding, he goes, well, Captain Ogg, do you have anything to say? You've been kind of quiet. And he goes, I have 7 points. He was just waiting. And he riddles off these 7 points that were just, inspired, amazing. And based on what he said, I was the first and only person released from my contract. And there had just been a federal statute passed saying I wasn't even allowed to pay back the years of college that they had paid for, even if I had the money, because it would discriminate against people who didn't have the money. I got released free of charge, scot-free. Right after that law changed. To my knowledge, I'm the only person who availed of that change in the federal statute. I got released, was able to finish my engineering degree, and then go to theology school and go into the full-time ministry. Amazing. I think back to that and I just go, that's one of my smooth stones. God bless me. So many other things. Cal Berkeley, 88. One fall semester, one campus. We decided we're going to do something that's never been done before. We public preached outside of cafes. We did crazy things on campus. We shared with everybody we could, and we saw 52 people baptized in one fall semester on one campus. It was this glorious, incredible time. I'll never forget the miracles that come to my mind and heart during that time. It's one of my smooth stones. PUP Manila. This Philippine university or something, University of the Philippines, it's called PUP anyway. This university in the Philippines, we had a campus ministry there. And this campus ministry got persecution, so much so that the university, it was a Catholic university, they forbid anyone from bringing Bibles on campus. So I'm in my campus ministers meeting and I'm getting updates, and this one guy, Ariel Estrada, he's still in the ministry, he's awesome. He goes, I got a problem on my campus. We're not allowed to bring Bibles into our campus. What? He goes, they literally search every book bag, every purse, and if there's a Bible inside of it, they make you either get rid of it or you can't come on campus. I'm like, can they do that? He goes, well, they're doing it. And so I go, bro, you just need to have faith that God can do it anyway. But really, I'm thinking, geez, man, how is that ministry going to grow? But I challenge him to have faith, okay, because we're in like this public meeting. Well, he goes back out there and he's meeting with his leaders. Or they're hanging out. Every day they'd hang out on this picnic table, sans Bible. Okay, they didn't have a Bible. And this colonel comes by. He's Muslim. He's the colonel of all the ROTC. He comes by, a big, tough-looking dude in his fatigues, and he stops and he goes, what is this group? What are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, we're like a Christian group, kind of like that. And so he goes, well, you know what? Because they were afraid. They thought he was going to really persecute him. He goes, you guys impress me. I see your relationships. I see your joy. I see you hugging each other. My cadets in the ROTC need what you have. Could you come speak to them? Every Sunday we meet once a month. They all come. There's I think at that one, there's 2,000 cadets that come every Sunday. They're students, and on Sunday they have to go once a month to stand at attention, and they have this whole ROTC thing. He said, could you come teach what makes you different? And they said, well, to do that, we'd have to bring a Bible, and we're not allowed to bring Bibles on this campus. He said, who said that? And they said, the university. He goes, you bring whatever Bible you want on this campus, and if anyone has a problem with it, you tell them to talk to the colonel. They're like, score, yes. And so they go, and Ariel, this brother, he has this little Gideon's Bible, because maybe his faith was only big enough to bring a little tiny green Bible in his pocket. And so he has this little Bible. He's standing in front of 2,000 cadets at attention, and he's like, and Jesus said, and he does this little sermon, and the colonel loved it. He's like, I want you to come back every week. And so then they started serving communion after he would do the lesson for anyone that wanted to. Then he shares a story the next month at our staff meeting, our campus staff meeting. Then I challenge everybody to imitate his faith, and I'll get into that later. Imitate his faith. I said, you go to your colonels and ask, can we hold a church service on Sunday for all the cadets? And so they all went and asked, and about 2/3 of them got permission. Then it turned out that every week we had between 5,000 and 10,000 men every Sunday standing at attention all throughout the Manila, hearing messages from God's Word to all the ROTC. It was like this amazing miracle. So many people converted. That's one of my favorite smooth stones. And I go, if God could take PUP that was tightly shut up, that nobody could bring in a Bible or bring it out, and turn it into this beacon and tower of faith, he can do anything. I have so many other stories. The Misi miracle of 99. Can't get into that here. The compassion of God in 2008. Times that my faith was so tested. Yet the victories, undeniable. that I can look back and I go, that was my lion. That was my bear. It turned on me. I grabbed it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. God brought about the victory, and certainly He's going to bring about a victory even now. What are the greatest spiritual victories in your life and in your ministry? I bet in a group like this and broadcasting out to the audience, man, you all have miracles that you could name them. You can describe them. You can think about them, and you could really recount the miracle that it was. There are so many smooth stones of miracles, so many lions and bears that are out there defeated, that if you really picked up those stones, there's a lot of Goliaths that can start to fall. In each of these lessons that I do, these mini lessons, I'm going to give you a personal assignment. And then I'm going to give you a discipleship group assignment so you can follow up during the week on these lessons. The practical assignment is this. The personal assignment, I'd like each of you to write down your top 5 miracle stories. Your top 5 miracle stories. And maybe you go, I don't have 5. You have 5. Maybe your stones right now are little bitty stones. And over time, you're going to replace them with bigger stones and bigger stones. And so you have like your 5 stones are going to get better and better. But there are 5. Start with your own conversion. Start with the conversion of a friend. You can go on. There are 5 miracle stories. Just write them down. Think about them in detail. Describe them. Go out and praise God for them. Carry them with you everywhere you go. The D group assignment. Have a group of friends together. Share with each other your stories, your smooth stones, and listen to theirs, and you'll build each other's faith. These are your smooth stones with which you can slay the Goliaths in your future.